Hey, welcome to the historic Livery Theatre here in beautiful downtown Goderich. We're celebrating all things salt this weekend. It's under our feet. It's part of us. And we have here a living legacy of the salt that's under our feet. Long time ago, a guy named Peter McEwan was drilling for oil, and he found salt. And from those humble beginnings, we now have the largest salt mine in the world here. And we have the great-great-grandchildren of Peter McEwan, who are a living legacy of that monumental find. Longtime residents of Goderich, Scott McEwan and his sister Beth, and their sister Anne, wrote a book about the discovery of salt called The Saltman. Very popular book. It's for sale a little bit later. Won't you please welcome Beth and Scott?
Thank you. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob. I see just in the Beth's got on her Reveresco pin here, which is the McEwan family pin and crest. And so we did some research into that, and what it means is I grow green again, because apparently McEwans were warriors, but not very good ones, because I think they usually lost in battle. So anyway, and it's fun, and Anne is super disappointed she can't be here today because she's put an absolute ton of work and research into her book. And I said, as I said yesterday, so she's kind of the A team, and we're the insurance-y people, so we're the BS team. So that's, appropriate again, I guess. So we're really happy that all this information's been put together again. And we'd like to thank Beth and I as well, the town, for our lovely T-shirts.
Yes. Okay. This is a picture in Carmonic. The Saltman opens in Carmonic, Scotland in 1852 when Peter was 12. Peter's father is pictured here, and his name was also Peter, and he was a blacksmith, and his mother was a washerwoman. In 1852, the McEwan family were preparing to move to Canada West in the province of Canada.
The photos from the land the McEwans settled, which is just down south of Mitchell, about 10 miles. And today, all that remains of the stone houses there's memorial cement pillars there that somebody installed at some point. We never really found out more about those, but it's kind of interesting, and I know they've offered that we can take them, but that's a whole other work routine if you get into that. So they, when they first arrived in Canada, the McEwans stayed with their relatives in Oxford County. They had met with the Mr. McKee from the Canada Company. So McKee, an officer, an officious-looking man, donned his spectacles. This is reading from Annie's book. Looked around the table, and they begin his spiel. The Canada Company has a new leasehold system where you pay no money down and have between 7 and 10 years to pay for the land. The land usually costs about $1.50 to $3 an acre, depending on the interest rate charged and where the land is. It could be up to 2 to 3%. Once your farm is paid off, you receive a deed. In addition to paying back your debt and interest, you will be obligated to the Canada Company to clear at least 4 acres of land a year, pay all the taxes, and perform statute labor such as maintaining the road by your property. There are 100 acres of land available for you. It's about 50 miles from here in the Huron Tract on Concession 12 in Hibbert Township in Perth County. 5 acres are already cleared, and there's a small log cabin on the property as well. So when the McEwans reached the land in Perth County, they worked from dawn to dusk because it needed a lot of work, and the cabin was very charitable, apparently, overcoming many hardships and challenges to establish a viable farm.
This is a picture of a spring pole drilling rig in Oil Springs. By 1861, when Peter was 21, he was growing restless. He left the family farm to drill for oil in Oil Springs. From 1861 to 1865, he learned the drilling trade. It was tough, dirty work. First, they had to dig a hole 6 by 8 feet and about 40 feet down. Then they lined that hole with logs to avoid any cave-ins. They then erected a 3-pole derrick over the hole and used a spring pole drilling rig to drill down to the earth. They threaded a rope through the pulley at the top of the derrick, one end of the rope attached to the drilling tools and the other end to the spring pole. In turn, the spring pole was attached to a treadle. 2 men pumped up and down on the treadle. Each time they took their foot off the treadle, the drill bit dropped into the hole and chiseled through a little more rock. It took 6 to 7 months to drill down 270 feet to reach oil. Peter drilled 20 wells in Oil Springs and became a chief driller. Then he was wooed to Goderich to drill for oil by a team of businessmen led by Samuel Platt.
So this is the picture of the Goderichs. Samuel Platt figures prominently in the story as he and Peter had a symbiotic relationship and were often jointly credited with discovery of salt. Samuel was the visionary and headed up the quest for oil in Goderich, and Peter had the technical drilling know-how to do this. Another excerpt from this story. Meanwhile, in Goderich, a fledgling port about 80 miles north of Oil Springs on the east coast of Lake Huron, Samuel Platt had oil fever. He closely followed the oil industry developments in Oil Springs and Petrolia. Platt had to find out if there was black gold in Goderich too. As well-respected owner of a flour and sawmill in Goderich, Platt persuaded other local business people to contribute $10,000 to start the Goderich Petroleum Company to fund the oil drilling project. Platt's first step was to find someone thoroughly vested in all aspects of oil and drilling. He needed first-hand information. He and several other investors went to Oil Springs to find an experienced driller. As they entered Oil Springs, they were overcome with the pungent smell of the raw, fresh oil. Well, gentlemen, I think we may be a tad overdressed for the occasion, Platt is thought to have said. When they began asking about experienced drillers, one name came to mind time and time again was Peter McEwan. Young, unmarried, energetic, and I'd drilled about 20 wells at that point. So they had a dapper-looking man, and colleagues approached him and asked him if he'd be interested in drilling in Goderich. When they found him, Platt introduced himself. "We're here from Goderich, a port on Lake Huron," he said. "I've heard of it," said Peter. "We've come highly recommended you as a skilled drilling man. We need someone who can give us the best possible chance of finding oil. Someone like you who is familiar with every aspect of drilling, someone who is not only capable of managing a crew of men, but who also feels comfortable reporting to the Goderich business community." Not wanting the opportunity to slip away, Peter said, Platt said, "We believe in our project and have significant backing. If we find the right person on the job, we can make it worthwhile." After discussing the proposition with Peter, Samuel and the other businessmen took their leave. They caught the stagecoach back to Wyoming and took the Great Western Railway to London, switched to the northern route to Clinton, and transferred to the Buffalo and Lake Huron Railway and headed west to Goderich. Transportation was not easy in those days. En route, they discovered, they'd learned, "I don't see any reason not to offer McEwan the job," Platt said. "He certainly has a good reputation with the people we talked to in Oil Springs, and despite the fact we interrupted him in the middle of drilling problems, he came across as very happy to be involved in the proposition."
This next slide, slide 6, is a picture of the British Exchange Hotel, and this is an excerpt from the book. In 1865, on Peter's first day in Goderich, Samuel showed him around town, including a tour of the Harbor Hill Road, where he got his first glimpse of Lake Huron. Next, they crossed the Maitland River on a wooden bridge built on stone piers, then entered Maitlandville, a small village on the narrow strip of land bounded by a hill to the east and a river to the west. Then Peter checked into the British Exchange Hotel to wash up and later went to Platt's for dinner. Okay.
That's Samuel and Mary's Platt's house on Victoria Street, right on the corner by the gas station there. "Forgive them," Miss Platt said when they arrived at his 2-story yellow brick home on Victoria Street. "The dirt in the yard still is churned up from construction. As you can see, the plaster's barely dry in our new house. We just moved a month ago and still have some things to finish." "Is this man the man who's going to discover oil?" asked one of Platt's children as they rushed to the door to meet Peter. "I'll do my best and I'll see what I can find for you," Peter said, smiling. The next day, Peter and Samuel went to Maitlandville, the 5 acres of land east of the bridge on the north side of the Maitland River. the Goderich Petroleum Company had purchased for the site to drill for oil.
This is a picture of the Maitland Valley where Peter first drilled for oil, and this is also the background for the cover of the Saltman. Here's an excerpt from that scene. Selecting a spot in the cleared area about 70 feet away from the riverbank, Peter sunk his shovel into the rich earth and uttered a silent prayer that he picked the right place to drill for oil. As he lifted the first shovel of dirt, a profound feeling vibrated through his body, like an echo from the past. Until yesterday, he'd never been to this land, and yet it felt familiar. It felt like coming home. From the fall of 1865 through to May of 1866, Peter and his crew drilled for oil. They drilled down almost 1,000 feet, by far the deepest well Peter had ever drilled. When funds were running short, they were just about to give up. The drill bit came up with a white crystalline substance, and it was salt. 9.
Map of Maitlandville?
Yes.
Okay. So this is actually an underwriter's map of where the Goderich Salt Works were located. The road entering the village changed names through the years from Ben Miller Road to Smith Hill to Salford Road. To the north, there's an apple to the north, there's an apple evaporator plant and tannery. In the bottom left-hand corner, the caption reads, Peter McEwan, the Goderich Salt Works, capacity 150 barrels per day. Heat used as steam, fueled by wood, coal. And it's kind of interesting because there's still cinders over the hill there. Brian and Mary Jane live there, and there's still cinders from because the cooperage was right on the edge of the bank, so they just shoveled the coal cinders out, and you can still kind of walk through those today. So, and it's really interesting to kind of look at that map and see where it was all laid out and kind of envision where that was now and who lives there now with everything that's changed, and based on these buildings they had there and the amount of work. And Platt had insisted that they build them. They were from, I think, North Carolina, and they brought all the bricks up from North Carolina to build it. So I don't know how you do that in those days, but it must be obviously a schooner or ship or something. So
this is a slide of the Goderich Salt Works, and this is about 1882, so it's about 16 years after salt was first discovered. After the salt discovery, Peter learned how to extract the salt from the earth in a brine solution and boil it off in massive kettles made by Runciman's foundry on East Street to produce salt. By December of 1866, the Goderich Salt Works, the first salt works in the province of Canada, was in full production. In this photo, you see the true mastery of local photographer Reuben Sallows with capturing a moment in time. The photo was taken from a hill overlooking the Goderich Salt Works in Maitlandville. In the foreground, you'll see the 4-foot lengths of firewood used to fuel the fires that boiled off the salt brine in the evaporator building. On the left, the cooper shop and stave and hoop building. The derrick over the salt well is the building in the background with the flag. There are 2 elevated tanks on the property that held 44,000 gallons of brine, but they are not seen in this picture. A 126 by 60 foot evaporator building held 26 evaporator kettles in 2 rows. Each kettle was 4.5 feet wide and held 140 gallons of brine. They evaporated about 10,000 gallons of saline every 24 hours, which yielded about 15 tons of salt, or about 100 barrels a day. In 1869, they changed to a more efficient steam-heated double-bottom evaporator pans. Were you going to talk about the kettles?
The what?
The kettles.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, and yes, the original, the kettles were, 4 feet round, and there's one by the museum on the sidewalk on the way in. And it's funny, if you drive around a bit, once in a while you can see them used as kind of landscaping or flower pots or that sort of thing. So, and it all just harks back to that. But as I mentioned, the picture of the salt works was kind of cool because it's an insurance picture, and it's got all the dimensions on it, and it's got the chimney on it. And Nancy, who lives next door, is just talking about the chimney. And when they took the chimney down, and we never knew the size of it, but you can see it in all the pictures, obviously, but it was 10 by 10 feet at the base and 90 feet tall. And so when they had to take it down, they hired our great-grandmother's brother, Ben Goldthorpe, to take it down because he was the foremost expert in dynamite and the fastest runner at the time. So they hired Ben, and it's funny because Ken and Elvin McGee actually run this, who were the car dealers here. They were there, and Elvin could get out of the car because he was 7 and Ken was 4, and he couldn't get out of the car to watch them try and blow up this chimney. So they tried 3 times to blow it up and couldn't do it. So they tried using a team of horses and a rope. And fortunately, Ben was a really good climber too, because they had to put the rope up at the top of this chimney to pull it over. So it's kind of interesting. So they got it pulled over, and I hope for the horse's sake the rope was longer than 90 feet. But anyway, that's just math. So anyway, when Mom and Dad got the lot in 1969, there's still this pile of bricks Nancy just alluded to. And it was funny because Dad said to me, like, if you want to take bricks over the hill in the wheelbarrow, I'll give you $1 a wheelbarrow, which is great, except the bricks were full of garter snakes, and I don't hate snakes, but I'm not going out of my way to pet one, so, and it's kind of interesting now because when we're down there and you think of that, and now there's a Massasauga rattler down in the flats at that house, which is kind of interesting. Brian's run across a couple times, so, what goes around comes around, so.
Okay. Did you want to do?
So is this the postcard? Yeah, this is the postcard view of the old bridge that used to cross the Maitland when the road came out at the end of Cambria Road and hooked around the hill and came back there. So, and I always like to point out there's a cow crossing the bridge. So whoever took the picture, it's a bit of kismet for the cow getting to town anyway.
This next slide is the logging crew, and it took about 1.5 cords of wood an hour to evaporate the brine. In the back of the photos, you'll notice a steam engine. In fact, in the Huron County Museum, there is a steam engine that was donated by Peter McEwan Jr.
Okay, and this is the cooperage. Yep, and it was just this picture's just been floating around on the internet a bit lately, which is just such a great picture. So at this barrel shop, I think they employed 5 people in the barrel shop. So there's a stave area where the coopers made the narrow strips of wood to form the sides of the barrels and the hoops to hold the barrels together. There's a heading mill to make the barrel ends and a shop to put the barrels together. If you look near the back of the room, you can see the flames shooting up to char and seal the inside of the barrels, which kept the salt much better and much better able to travel, sort of thing. So each barrel was filled with salt, weighed 280 pounds, and if you could move a barrel of salt yourself, you could have it for free at that point. If they had too many barrels for salt, they sold them for other purposes, like flour, oatmeal, and apples. At the back, on the back wall of the building, which we were able to enhance a bit, it says the Goderich Salt Work, Goderich, Ontario, the oldest established salt works in Canada, Peter McEwan, proprietor, because McEwans are a little narcissistic, name-wise. So, and at that point, overall of Goderich, I mean, this factory in Salford made 200 barrels a day, but overall, all of Goderich was 2,000 barrels a day. So that's where all the trees went. To boil salt and to make barrels.
This is a picture with the famous horse Ned. Family has it that when Peter rode Ned, the horse, to Salford in the morning, he'd sometimes forget all about Ned and hitch a ride back to Goderich on a load of salt. However, if a resident of Salford saw Ned tied up, he just untied him, and Ned always found his way home to Cambria Road in Goderich. And behind Scott, we have another photo of Ned. Apparently, this was and the whole family went to his funeral, and it was his best horse ever.
It was a big function. They lived in the big red brick house on Cambria Road, so they kind of have a ceremony to kind of bury him over there by where the ambulance station is now. So Ned's over there somewhere, and it's fun because we thought he was a pretty reliable horse, so we named our office building on West Street Ned the Horse Holdings Incorporated. We had inquiries, and my poor wife getting calls from Revenue Canada wondering what the deal with Ned is, and you think you're in tax trouble, and they just want to know the horse story. So.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Slide 15's up, Scott.
15, okay. This is the rig house and the dog house, right? So which is just a typical setup sort of thing. They and how they found it most efficient and how they were able to lock everything and had enough room for the derrick and stuff like that. So
these are the salt wells in Huron County and beyond. Many investors and drillers flooded into the area wanting to share of white gold. In 1872, there were 17 salt manufacturers in Huron County alone. There were salt works in Clinton, Seaforth, producing more salt than Goderich and Maitlandville.
Okay. And where are we now? Clinton, Beth?
Sorry.
Oh, salt works in Goderich?
Sorry.
There were 12 salt blocks alone in Goderich, drilled from 1866 to 1877. And in 1877, Atchell tried unsuccessfully establishing a small mine at the mouth of the Maitland River by actually digging a mine and bringing people in to dig. And they did all kinds of huge engineering drawings and went through many fatalities apparently, and but it never worked, and because it just constantly flooded, and they couldn't get it dug out. And Keith just filled it in a few years ago, sort of thing. So.
The salt works in Clinton. The salt works were established in 1868 and 1870. There were Stapleton Salt Works who had 2 wells, and the Clinton Salt Works, which was later renamed the McGarva Salt Works in 1875.
Okay, and there's salt works in Seaforth as well, which include the Seaforth Salt Works, the Merchant Salt Works, and the Eclipse Salt Works. And they were, again, closer to wood then, because wood was getting scarce over here, and a little further down the rail line. So they were super successful and eventually kind of surpassed Goderich. And it's funny, at that point, they got into a legal battle between, I think, Seaforth and Goderich people called the Ontario Salt Case. So if you're ever looking for just any additional reading about all of this stuff, it exists in the McGill University law website. A law student rewrote the whole thing 20 years ago, and it was the first case of restrictive trade in North America, because they had agreed on prices and then other people changed them and they all sued each other. But there's a really good history anyway in McGill law. If you're looking for a whole recap of kind of Goderich and what we're talking about, it's interesting to read and go through. It's about 70 pages, I think. So.
There were other salt works as well. Kincardine had 2. Carenbrook, which was later renamed Dublin, had 1. There was 1 in Blythe, and there was 1 in Hensel. However, there were areas where drilling for salt was not successful. They drilled wells to great depths in Mitchell. In Mitchell, they went down 2,100 feet, and in Listowel, they went down 1,800 feet, but they did not find any salt.
And then there's other salt works continued in Brussels, Exeter, and Wingham. Well, there were salt wells other salt wells in Ontario in places like Courtright, Parkhill, Sandwich, Sarnia, Warwick, and Windsor. In the Saltman, the focus is on wells directly involved with Peter and ones he drilled, sort of thing. So,
this is a lithograph of the International Salt Company, which was Canada's largest salt works. Well, Peter had long dreamed of opening a massive, efficient salt works. It took years of planning and promoting the idea to investors for the plan to come together. They finally bought 154 acres on the bank of Lake Huron in the southwest corner of Goderich, just over by where the present-day sewage treatment facility is. They used 20 acres of this property for the salt company, and the rest was used for farmland. They started this company in 1873 with $100,000, which equates to about $2.7 million today. The International Salt Works opened in 1874, and their chief customer was Plankington Armour and Company's branches in Milwaukee and Chicago. This Plankington Armour and Company were the largest suppliers of pork products in the world, and they preferred the International salt to any other salt because it preserved meat so quickly. They employed about 40 people, and they produced between 600 and 800 barrels a day. There also was a tramway that ran down to the lake with a wharf that extended 300 feet into the lake to allow large lake freight-carrying vessels to load with salt. And if you go down when the water is low, you can still see some of the piers in the water today.
Yeah. And it's interesting because then they had come into these huge contracts with Plankington Armour. And I mentioned yesterday that there was U.S. was still supporting a huge army at the end of the Civil War, which required salt for, beans and meat and everything those guys march on, sort of thing. So they would take it and, huge money and huge, almost Wild West financial fortune for Goderich, just because, the salt from here is much easier to get at than salt, because other salt from New York State and even England is a 5% impurities, and salt out of here was less than 1, so they could use it directly. That's an interesting picture of the International. It was done by an artist named T.M. Schmedley, who was a lithographed artist, and he and Canada's Governor General at the time were buddies, and they traveled the Great Lakes documenting life in lithographs for 2 summers. So if you want, there's a whole series of them, and there's some really good Lake Superior shots, but there was that one done in Goderich, and there's also one of Saltman standing, working, so which are kind of fun and available pretty cheaply. So.
Mm-hmm. And they also, with that tramway down to the water, they would also, what they do is it was a 2-cart system, right. So they'd load the top cart with salt, and they would send the salt down, and the gravity would force the empty cart at the bottom up again, so they didn't have to use any other type of mechanical means to get the salt down to the wharf. And that type of transportation really saved them a lot of money and really made it an efficient operation to have it close to its transportation system.
Because it was, the biggest problem with Saltford was getting salt out of the valley, especially on dirt roads with wagons and mud and things like that. So they thought by doing this, which just saved a ton of hassle of trying to get stuff up the hill out of the valley, wagons loaded with 300-pound barrels of salt. So this worked out really well in the end.
Okay. Ready for
Is this
drillers?
Okay, this is a picture of drillers in the drill house, which we found. And we think this is maybe the International, because it's the only one I've ever kind of seen with a lookout on the top of it.
Okay. Now, Anne has a spoiler alert slide here in her presentation, because we all know we didn't make this presentation up, which she did it, but she has a spoiler alert here for people that have not read the book, in case they have a mental picture of what Peter looked like. The next picture is a picture of Peter when he was about 40 years old, and she, in her notes, she said, please look away if you don't want to have a preconceived notion of what Peter looks like. So this was taken in about 1880. And this is a picture of Peter's portrait with the coal fadge.
Okay, and the coal fadge was a twin-mast 90-foot schooner Peter bought in 1874, and later sold it about 1889 to Captain John MacDonald in Goderich. And Peter had hired Captain William Robinson from Goderich to sail it, who was a well-known area captain sort of thing. And it's kind of fun because I've reconnected with his great-great-grandson, who works for the Canada Steamship Lines as a captain. So, and he said he has all kinds of documents and pictures about this time he's going to share with us at some point. So it's kind of fun to have that in play. There's a whole pile of information on the coal fadge because they wrecked it a couple times and ran it aground, and so all the accident records are online. So you Google coal fadge and you can see, wrecked here, Peter McEwan, wrecked here, Peter McEwan. So it's kind of a, so, I'm not any better. I had a 17-foot boat and I hid it behind my house, so my mom didn't know I had it. And I don't know what I would have done with a 90-foot boat, though, because my house is only 60 feet long. So. So the coal fadge would dock at the International Salt Company wharf and ran salt around the Great Lakes, mainly to Chicago and Milwaukee at that point. Peter's son, PJ, said that the photo taken by Ruben Salos, a man of who painted a portrait of Peter and put it on the stern of the coal fadge, which was considered one of the fastest and best ships on the Great Lakes. The reason for putting the painting on the ship's stern was so that all of the Father's goodwill and spirit would accompany the crew on every port on the lakes. And our cousin in John in Toronto still has it's on a piece of tin, and he still has the portraits.
Sorry about the slideshow. Yeah. Okay. This is the logo slide. It's Peter became a savvy marketer, and he had this striking logo developed for barrel tops in 1882 when he bought the Goderich Salt Works, where he had originally discovered salt in 1866. The logo pictures a sailor sitting on a barrel of salt floating on Lake Huron. It reads, "The Goderich Salt Works, oldest rock salt refinery in America. The old salt for table and dairy, for household, farm, and general use. Goderich, Ontario, Canada. McEwan's Peerless Salt." And inside each maple leaf, there is a Latin saying, and the translation is, "Salt covers everything." And we have original barrel top here that you can see it's deteriorated a bit around the edges, and it did come from the museum. So.
Yeah, and we were really lucky because I kind of looked into the barrel tops, and we knew there's 3 or 4 around in play, and you see them for sale once in a while, because it's funny how the quality of them compared to things that are printed today, and they're 135 years old. But anyway, I was talking to Patty Lamb at the museum, and she went to look and said, "Oh, I know we have 1 or 2," and she went to look, and there was a box of them, sort of thing. So I think they had maybe 30, and we were lucky to be able to write and make a donation and get some of them decommissioned for our kids. So we had them all. Adam framed them all for us, and it's nice we've kind of passed those along in safe glass, UV glass protected cases. Anyway,
there you are. 27.
This is the business cards and samples and stuff, and just odds and ends of papers we made will come through. There are a few highlights from some of the things, like a 280-pound barrel of salt at that point was $1.65. 280 pounds of granulated cheese or butter salt was 60 cents. A ton of common salt was $2.25 at that point, so pretty cheap. The Goderich Salt Manufacturing Company business card provided by local historian Larry Mooring as of interest because we're not sure how Platt, Scobie, and McEwen were affiliated, nor have we ever heard of this Goderich Salt Manufacturing Company. We can only surmise that the 3 banded together from their individual salt companies under this company name for marketing purposes. Here's Goderich businesses we know were involved were Mary Ann Platt, so Sam's widow, is listed as the proprietor of the Tecumseh Salt Works. She employed 19 men and was the only female salt manufacturer at that time in Canada. John Scobie was from 1880 to 1888 and operated the Star Salt Works near the CN rail station on East Street. And Peter at different times managed the Harley Salt Works, the International Salt Works, the Tecumseh Salt Works, the Goderich Salt Works, and the Ogilvie and Hutchison also, which was a salt factory they had right down at the harbor as well. So.
This is a family portrait from 1889. Aside from farming and oil drilling, the Salt Discoveries was a softer side to the novel that featured the relationship between Peter and his wife, Christy, and their children. Sitting clockwise from left are Peter, Will, Bella, PJ, Johnny, Christy, Margaret, and Christine.
And this is their house on Kimber Road where the family all grew up. Sort of thing, which was a really nice 2-story red brick house at the time with a veranda surrounding the front porch. They bought it in 1884 because they had 5 kids, large family, and they had outgrown the cottage that was located close to the International Salt Works down on the lake shore there. The new house is closer to the Goderich Salt Works in Saltford that Peter recently purchased.
Okay. And there's the original of that slide is up here at the front if anyone wants a closer look at that house. And this is the house today. It has had its porch removed and it's been divided into several apartments. It's across from the ambulance station.
This is a picture of the clock they brought with them, which is outlined in the Saltman, and it kind of follows the history of the clock sort of thing, which is super interesting. But as I say, I think it's kind of funny how you come to Canada and, you should bring sweaters and mitts instead of a 5-foot clock. But it came with them, and it's still in decent shape. It doesn't work right now just because it kind of makes a racket. Mary Jo wants to get it redone, but I'm not sure. So we'll see if that happens for Nat. So, and it's in really good shape and really tough for something being from probably 1780. They were given it as a wedding present when they came to Canada. So.
This is a Sallows photo of Peter at age 60. It's the one you most often see of him. It's the one in the museum, and it's also featured in the Sallows Gallery.
Drilling statistics. which we were able to find a fair bit about, and it's kind of, there are drilling records somewhere, but we've never really been able to come up with them. But, well, Anne toyed with the idea of calling the book The Drilling Man, that she thought that would be too much like a dentist gone wrong or something. So, so he probably drilled, we think, 21 oil wells and oil springs in Bothwell with that arduous process we talked about before, and 14 minimum salt wells, you know, as far in Maitlandville, Goderich, Seaforth, Mitchell, Listowel, Carmunnock or Dublin, Hensel, and Wingham. And he also drilled about 5 water wells minimum, we think, in Goderich and Mimico. And it's kind of cool because you can, for us, you can drive down the Dock Hill and look at the artesian well running at the bottom of the Dock Hill since they drilled it. And, you know, it's kind of something your great-great-grandfather did that still works, right? So.
This slide's entitled Drilling Today. To this day, just across the river from where Peter first discovered salt, salt wells are still drilled for Compass Minerals. Their brine evaporator plant has a production capacity of 140,000 tons of salt a year. Not to mention their salt mine not too far away has a production capacity of 8 million tons of salt a year. Picture here in the summer of 2023 are driller Brad Stevenson and Compass Minerals senior geologist Jasmine Moxham, along with a close-up of the slurry that comes up from the earth when a borehole is cleared. These two kindly gave of their time to answer questions for Anne when she was doing her book, and they put her on site to let her see what it looks like to drill a hole and have some brine and salt come up.
Carmunnock?
Yes.
Okay.
This is number 35.
Okay, yeah. This is Carmunnock in Scotland. Carmunnock Community Council put Anne in touch with Pat Hunter, who went above and beyond, answering endless questions about Scotland and what they would have faced going from Scotland to Canada. Wonderful research aid and help to her completing her research and the book. And Anne also found people in Mitchell, relatives, distant relatives kind of thing, who had a number of letters and just family mementos and things like that, and they kept everything from this time as they settled down there, and the original families buried down by Mitchell sort of thing in Roy's Cemetery. So Anne connected with them and was able to get just that end of the story sort of thing. Here's a letter Peter wrote from Bothwell to his brother in 1867, and it's just kind of interesting with the diction and spelling and everything like that. So this is to his brother, Mr. John McEwen, who was in Goderich here. He said, I am well at present. I received your letter dated November 1st. I have finished the contract, but have not been paid yet. Never mind the money I spent. I have 300 due me here. I guess I will get along. I had pretty hard luck on the drilling the hole and broke the gears and bilbits twice. Look after my place for me and help me. I will be back to help put Father's crops in. I'll provide you with money to go to Goderich and get telegraphing and bookkeeping done. Soon let me know how Father is, and I will be home soon to take care of things. And when I'm done at this place, see that the beasts are kept off. Which we sort of thought is stay well, or, you know, I'd never really heard that before, so it's kind of neat. Oil Springs, a friend introduced Anne to Charlie Fairbank and Pat McGeehan Oil Springs, who were fourth generation of the Fairbanks family in the oil business, and Pat did a lot of work in helping Anne with research and all of these items.
Probably no one can read this, but this is a list of the experts that helped Anne do the book. And she had 43 people help research, edit, and promote The Salt Man. And in particular, she wants to mention Scott McEwen, who she said is known as Canada's salt historian. Together with his family, Scott wrote McEwen's Peerless Salt, which formed the foundation for The Salt Man. And we have that book up here if anybody's curious to see it.
Scrapbook? Yeah. Mom had a scrapbook, and we're just putting this out there for information, but she had a red scrapbook, and it had all the original salt stuff in it, and Mom loaned it to somebody. We're not sure who or where it went or anything like that, so we're just putting a notice on that. And
yeah. It's missing.
It's missing. Yep.
Anybody see it? Let us know.
So if you see it at, the Restore, Lisa, like.
Yeah. This mentions Anne's website. She has a very good website, and on it she has photos, maps, historical information. And she also said to mention that if you have any questions directly for her, if you go to the website and email her, she will answer any questions you might have as a result of anything that's come up today.
Question?
No, you got the final one. This is, Anne was asked why she wrote The Saltman, and just a quick aside too, it took her probably about 5 years to write the book. She spent the first 2 years doing research, and then she started writing, and then after that she was writing and doing research at the same time. And so people ask her why write The Saltman, and she said it's mainly to honor Peter and Christie's memory, and then she has included this quote that says the way she feels about it.
Okay. Questions? Anybody?
Great job, you guys. Let's hear for Scott.
Question, Rob?
Thanks, Rob.
Good job, buddy. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's quite an amazing story, eh? Isn't it? It's such great work, what history we have here. If anybody has a question for this gang here, just put your hand up and I'll walk over to you. If not, just thinking about it. No.
Thinking about it.
We'll guess, right? We'll guess, right? Because, you want Ann, but we'll guess, right? Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, here. Let me run over. Wait, hang on. Got to get you on tape.
All right, okay. I'm just wondering, where does the salt come from? Like, why is the salt there?
I think like ancient oceans, right? So as the Earth settled or whatever, and
it was the the ice age. The oceans were over.
Just as
all
they
the land.
evaporated over millions of years, and then I don't know, what lands on top of that, like volcanics and stuff, all that. So over the millions of years that happens, and here. Between us and the salt, which caused all kinds of problems, 300 feet of hard limestone. So, so over the ancient oceans, and a lot of what they got originally in Goderich was at 600 feet, but Sifto's at 1,800. So, all different layers as things settle, and then stuff settles in between. I was really lucky that I was able to get a chunk of salt from 600 feet because they don't go there anymore. Because my son-in-law Brian over there was working and redoing the shafts at Sifto, and there's a stop at 600 feet where we used to work, so he grabbed me a chunk. So
Nice.
Yeah, I think.
Except every time the kids are in the office, they lick it to make sure it's salt.
We had a fella from the mine here yesterday, and that was a question too, and that's exactly it.
Yes, it's
an
seas.
ancient seabed.
It's ancient seabed.
Tens of millions of years old. And salt is not like granite. It's more like silly putty, is how he described it. You think it's hard, but over time, it actually spreads out and finds a place to coagulate. So that's what happens. So they have this massive amount of salt, a block, that goes from, Mitchell all the way to Michigan. And so we're just on part of it. So that's where the salt comes from. A good question, though. Yeah, it's hard to imagine. How does all that salt get there in one place?
20 McEwen points. Good job.
Oh, there you go. You're in. I got McEwen points. Yes, all right. Anybody else? Oh, yes, please.
In the book, it said that one of his sons lived in a house in Salford.
Yes.
Yep.
And ran the plant.
Yes.
Right.
Whose house was that?
Vandenbroek's.
Yeah, Ed Vandenbroek's.
Ed Vandenbroek's house, yeah. And it's interesting because you kind of follow the lines of that sort of thing. And they lived there, and you drive by, and then they moved from there onto that really nice red brick house on Cambria Road, or Maitland Road, right by the train station. Yeah. That's where they moved from Salford into there kind of thing.
And actually, the woman that lives there now was here yesterday.
Yeah,
yes.
That's right. Yeah. So those houses still exist. They're still around. They're still around. Yeah. Great job, you guys. Thank you very much. Any other questions here? All right, let's give him a big. Hang on. This guy needs to know more. All right.
Sorry, I may have misunderstood, but so when Peter was drilling for oil,
right,
and then found the salt, was like, how did he jump from oil to salt in terms of like it became that business? Was he always like a business partner in when he was drilling for oil?
And I think that he went to New York State. I think when they discovered that to see functions and all that, because it changed 180 degrees. And as soon as they discovered it was this 1% impurity, they knew it was a gold mine, really. So I think they changed and they went and looked at all the evaporation technique kind of thing they did, because the way they did it is it's a two-pipe system where you put down the water in the one pipe and bring it back up through a smaller pipe in the middle. And due to the change in gravity in the water, it's almost self-circulating because it's brine when it comes back up. So they changed that, and they figured out all the technique for boiling pans and all that sort of stuff. So
They pivoted. Yeah.
Well, 180. And it's a story that they think, you see, they had run out of money and time to drill, but somebody poured oil down the hill at night, or down the well at night. So they went in, and there's a bunch of, big mess from oil, and they thought they'd hit a spurt or something, so they kept going. And they got more money, but so...
And back in the day,
that's
too,
kismet, right? So
salt was more valuable than oil was back in the day, because that was the only way they could preserve things. So that it was, because you think, oh, why are they so excited about salt? But it was very, very important.
I wonder if that's a true story. I know it's one of those...
The oil story?
Yeah,
the oil story.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
So
Like,
we
it's
kind of
not
run out of money,
legend.
and, some local hooligans in town went,
Yeah.
and go at night,
or
pour down
somebody
oil.
wanted to keep it going, or, whatever,
the
right?
other,
Or keep the funding going, or
so
whatever.
That's how it happened, was out of a practical joke. Pretty interesting, eh? That's
Yeah.
cool. All right, we'll let you guys get out into your beautiful day. Enjoy the rest of Goderich. Thank you very much for enjoying. Thanks. Appreciate that.
Thank you.
The guys got books for sale here and things. They're happy to sign them too if you'd like. And there's lots of artifacts and stuff to come and have a look at if you're so willing. Thanks.
Well, that worked better.